Let's see if we can't get this thing going here this morning. A little bit right here. Try to hear what they have to say. This one guy that they're going to have on there, I've always, he's a historian and I've always liked his intellect. This is the day after the Super Bowl. February, I believe it's the 10th, maybe the 9th. I don't have a calendar in front of me right here. Year 2024. After we get through videoing the things that I'm going to video here on this particular show, I'm going to go outside and show my viewers towards some of the progress that I've made in trying to maintain and support my independence here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, after a major operation on my left ankle.
I guess I'll start big picture here with these comments about NATO. John Meacham, just as it pertains to, well, there is no precedent, is there?
No. The post-war, World War II, the post-World War II order, which actually, for all of its imperfections, maintained a basic peace, has maintained a basic peace, has tended to check the appetites, the ambitions, the designs of dictators, is under a threat from within. This is Abraham Lincoln's birthday, Mika, which I'm sure you'll be having a cake later with the great man about this. But Lincoln said early in 1837 that if America ever falls, it won't be because of a foreign force. It will be because of an internal enemy, an internal foe of the Constitution and the Declaration rising up. And that's what's happening. And it's very clear, and we can go on about it, but the question before the country could not be clearer. Do you want a president who defends the Constitution and an order that has proven successful, creating American prosperity, creating American security, or do you want someone who is irrationally and for his own purposes trying to tear that down? And that's the question we face. It will be framed again and again and again, and this is just today's framing.
Okay. In just today's framing, pertaining to what you just got through saying, you have to look at this logically in trying to understand what has led us down this endless road to the point that we're actually talking this way. Because I can remember just as a young child, I'm talking less than 8, 9, 10 years old, how that my grandparents rallied around various political leaders and political ideals that did not venture off into even beginning to declare our Constitution as it being unconstitutional. If they would have had, back during the Carter, the Nixon, the President Ford, and even Kennedy. I can't remember necessarily the Kennedy era, but I can remember some of the things that went on afterwards. But if they had of, it would have been looked upon as being treasonable. Absolutely treasonable. So you have to ask the $64,000 question, what has led us to this primrose path that obviously we're on, that nobody is either smart enough or cares enough about towards trying to get us off this path in the destruction of not only our Constitution, but in the destruction of our great nation. We are teetering on things right now that I believe started way, way back after World War II, probably back in the 50s, whenever they allowed for Elvis Presley to get on the Ed Sullivan Show, and the Beatles later on. I think it was 63 or something like that. Whenever the Beatles made their debut over here, you've heard me talk again and again and again about the small fox. It's the small foxes that you got to worry about that are so small that you can't really see them unless you're really, really looking for them. And those small foxes gets in the vines because they're small enough to to weave in and out of the vines to the point that if there's enough of them, it can literally destroy a grape vineyard. And these are the warning signs that it talks about in the Bible, and that was the reason why that I believe that my grandmother's era, back in the 50s, which would have put her basically somewhere around the age of the late 40s or early 50s, stood up against this movement that come over here to America. But because there wasn't enough of them, and because of the hippie era and the Woodstock era and the free sex era, it basically overpowered them. And it has put us where we are today in witnessing what we are witnessing towards some of the most embarrassing, ungodly things that are being motivated around the American people's lives, that whenever I was growing up as a young child would have been looked upon as being treacherous or treasonous. It would have been a complete total rebellion against the ideal of our original builders of this great nation. But today, we've been brainwashed. We've been calloused. We've been tainted. We've been bamboozled. We have been corrupted to the point that now, today, we don't look at things in the same limelight as what even my mom and dad or their mothers and fathers would have looked upon things 40, 50, 60 years ago. It was 60 years ago, February, was whenever the Beatles made their debut in basically changing America, or helping to change America to where America is today. Now, granted, I was just as brainwashed as everybody else, and I fell for a lot of those enchanting songs and a lot of those movements that went on during that era, because everybody else was basically walking off into the same direction. It is my responsibility, it is my duty today to enlighten my viewers and to tell the Christian society of not only the things that has occurred in the past, not only the things that are occurring in the present, but possibly the things that are going to occur in the future if we do not awaken and turn from our sinful and ungodly wicked ways. That's the best that I can do towards being a messenger or a distributor of the Word of God, towards telling people that, hey, these are the consequences if you continue on this primrose path that's basically going to lead either an individual or a community or a nation or a planet off in to doom.
Right, but John Meacham, what I see happening, which again could be a real sort of turning point in our history, is you don't just have people at these rallies, cheering on these incredible statements, anti-democratic statements to say the least, but now you've got the House bending to his will. It's
worrisome. Actually, it goes beyond worrisome. It goes beyond just being. I'm trying to think of the right word towards being people being uneasy. It's actually frightening. It has become frightful in looking at some of the things that are being said and done in public domain, that basically the American people thinks that it's okay. The American people thinks that it's fine. The American people thinks that there is no consequences to this primrose path journey that obviously we are on right now. And of course, somebody like me that stands up and red flags it and says to the American public, and there's red lights blinking, pertaining to danger, Mr. Rogers. They look at me as me being awkward, goofy, a fanatic. They look at me, towards me being somebody with a mental illness. Somebody with a mental illness is how they look at people such as myself, because I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to alert them. I'm trying to bring advisories to them that obviously are continuously being ignored. If you're going in the wrong direction and somebody tells you, hey, you're going in the wrong direction of meeting or getting to your destiny, if you plan on getting to the original destiny that you claimed that you was heading towards, and you continue to stay on that path, then you have no one else to blame other than yourselves. Now the fault has fallen upon to the feet of those that can speak out, that obviously either don't speak out or won't speak out. Maybe they're frightened, maybe they're unconcerned, maybe they themselves thinks that we're on the right path. But I'm telling you right now, the primrose path that the American people are on has become so concerning that it is frightful. It is absolutely frightening in looking through the crystal ball and saying, wow, these are the very things that my grandmother and grandfather stood up against, but wasn't powerful enough to resist these movements. And now, look at where we are today. I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. The word peace sounds like a very noble word, the same as loyalty, the same as duty, the same as other words out there that we want to classify as being very, very notable or respectful. But the word peace don't mean nothing. It does not mean nothing other than it being another word if people aren't going to respond and react in the proper way to formulate that peace. I know a lot of people thinks that whenever I make my complaints or I make my stand about what's went on in the past 30 plus years with the Windmill Ministries missions pertaining to the founder, which is myself that's speaking right now, they think that I'm a complainer. They think that I'm a whiner. They think, well, he's unsatisfied with how the people have treated him. That's only part of it. That's only part of my complaints. That's only part of my criticisms. And hopefully it will be a positive criticism in trying to change the direction of people's paths. But the other part, which is the most severest and importantest part, is the fact that you have disappointed God. You have disappointed the creator of this creation that did not expect for America to go down this primrose path of doom and gloom, especially whenever people such as myself was raising red flags, and the whole time you continuously was knocking them down. You was continuously trying to make something out of something that wasn't there to make, as far as trying to make me out to be a homegrown terrorist here in my own motherland. The people obviously have been perverted. They have been morally converted. They have been spiritually converted. They have been politically perverted. They have been perverted whenever it comes to the morals of how this great nation was founded and where we should be that we're not at this present time. And that's the reason why I continue to keep telling people again and again and again, if there's ever been a time that people really needed to analyze the first 4 chapters of Revelations in understanding that God is making a stance, but he's making a stance in a form of love, in warning people again and again to repent, to go back and do thy first works over again. And if you don't, there will be dire circumstances that follows in behind that activity. There is no gray area. There is no lukewarm area. Matter of fact, the gray areas and the lukewarm areas are the areas that God actually despises. He actually hates the lukewarmers. He actually hates those that want to lean more towards in the gray area. Kind of like the way that our politics has been run for the past, I guess, 25, 30 years, is that people, whenever it actually comes to the voting of a presidential election, somehow or another they feel comfortable in looking at the analogy by saying, well, we don't feel like neither one is worthy of leadership, but because we have nothing else to choose from, we're going to choose the lesser of the two evils. I have heard that again and again and again through other American presidential elections, and to be quite honest with you, to think that the American people have bought into this lie is only shortchanging them in every perspective that you can think of. And if you don't believe me, start looking at some of the problems that right now the American people are having to be exposed to because of that analogy. The lesser of the two evils. The lesser of the two evils. To me, Gog and Magog is the lesser of the two evils. And it really don't matter whether or not it's Gog or Magog. According to God, he despises and hates both. Because that's exactly where Lucifer is going to run off to right before the Heavenly Father brings destruction to those on a spiritual level that follows after this Antichrist, this Lucifer supernatural being, for the last and final time, pertaining to the war of Armageddon. And if you don't believe me, read the book for yourself pertaining to the King James in the book of Revelations that's in correspondence with the latter part of Daniel. These are the things that I've continuously preached about and told people about, that I have been steadily demoralized and dehumanized on account of.
And impacting legislation that perhaps both parties and would have been very constructive at this point for our country and for our foreign policy. And Donald Trump is able to squash it. And it appears that cancer is now spreading into the Senate.
It is.
It's a very interesting analogy. The ancients used to talk about the body politic, because the health of the city, the health of the country was as important as one's own health. Corruption meant disease, not graft. Crisis comes from the word, the course of a disease, where a patient lives or dies. It is a disease. And we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending it's not and wanting to be kind to our 401k, Peter Millar wearing Republican friends who are enabling this.
You can classify sin as it being a disease if that's the way you want to classify it. But the bottom line is this: sin is sin. Wickedness is wickedness. Now, you can try to paint it up. You can try to glamour it up. You can try to soothe your own consciousness by saying, well, everybody's got sin. Everybody's doing it. But that still does not excuse our personal responsibilities with our personal relationship with God. And right now, I'm talking to myself. I am preaching to myself right now, because a lot of times we will be bought into this ideal, well, everybody's doing it, or everybody's got sin, or this or that, trying to make up a reasoning in saying, well, yeah, it's bad, but it ain't that bad. That was kind of like what Marvin Alexander, our state senator, said whenever Donald Trump done what he done towards basically trying to bribe the Ukrainians by telling the Ukrainians, well, we're going to give you this, providing that you do this, this, and that. Well, that wasn't part of the original agreement. But according to Marvin Alexander in Nashville, Tennessee,
but what about? But there's nothing on the left
that spoke out and said, yeah, Donald Trump done wrong. He done wrong, but he didn't do wrong enough that would cause for him to lose his position in the presidency. once more leaning towards that gray area, leaning towards that lukewarm area.
Americanism, if you want, that is removing them from that conversation.
Americanism.
And so the only way to fix this, I think, is to beat them. Beat them at the ballot box, and then, they can react poorly and try to change the rules.
And that's not going to beat it.
But
I'm telling you right now, that's not going to beat what we're looking at. The only way to beat what we're looking at is going to take a fundamental, internal, spiritual revival movement. And it's going to take a group of people that want to bond together in the Lord to see it turned around. Because if not, we're going to be just like a dog chasing after its tail. Yeah, we're going to be moving, but we're not going to be going nowhere.
I think you can do this. I'm curious how that happens in an environment right now where the airwaves, whatever you call podcast airwaves, websites, publications are littered with disinformation. And I know this was the case in the past, but I think it's at a new level where you have several networks, but primarily Fox News, and they're on a loop all day about Biden's age. They're on a loop all day about Biden talking about the Mexican president when he was talking about Egypt. They're on a loop all day about that. And the loop on Trump, this is just a fact. It's not, and it happens to play into our outlooks, but you could run Trump's gaffes and you wouldn't have enough time in our 4-hour show. And yet there's a totally different standard for both. So how do you beat them at their game? How do you vote them out when people are being fed a lot of bad information?
The question is what people are taking that information and ingesting it, right? And by and large, it seems to me, you have a base of folks who have made a decision that Trump is their heroic figure and they're going to follow him no matter what. Those are not, I hate to say this, they're not reachable people, right? They've made a decision. And the only way they change their mind is if I think if they lose. The people who are reachable are very few, right? They are probably not watching this conversation. It's probably a couple of million people spread across 7 states, 6 or 7 swing states. And so the story you tell them is the full story of what this choice is about. And President Biden, as you say, he's my friend. I help him when I can. There's no secret about that. I think that he has proven himself again and again to be a hugely effective president. I have no anxieties about his capacity to make important decisions for the country. His political question is having me say that has virtually no effect. He's got to show it. You can't tell voters things, you have to show them. And so you tell a story, you have a president engaged in the life of the country in which his capacities, which are formidable, are on display. And those voters who are going to save us are these independent and swing voters. And when I say save us, I mean that. And I didn't think we'd be sitting here talking like this 4 or 5 years ago. But just, as you say, just look at what Trump said yesterday and what he's going to keep saying. So the important thing to me is tell the story of what has made America great, which is a devotion to the Constitution, to the Declaration, and to sanity.
No.
What
has made America great, going all the way back to our forefathers, going all the way back to the builders, was God Almighty. And whenever you deviate from that, you are telling an incorrect statement, which is basically a lie. What made America great is the very thing that's going to either continue to make America great or it's not going to continue to make America great, pertaining to mankind leaning more towards the righteous, holy, eternal God, pertaining to a spiritual movement that should have began in the late 80s after 9 tapes went to the White House pertaining to Ronald Reagan's administration, but did not. Did not. And the reason why it did not was because the so-called church communities at that time looked at this message coming from the messenger and said to themselves, we don't like this message. We're not going to support this message. And as far as I'm concerned, lo and be damned to this person is trying to promote this message. What was the message that the founder of the Windmill Ministries was promoting? I wasn't just promoting Revelations, but I was promoting the whole Bible pertaining to love, grace, forgiveness, unity, a righteous, holy, eternal God. I wasn't just promoting the things of Revelations, but going back into that promotion of how that society turned their backs and rebelled against this message, is that they looked at the message coming from the messenger in the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, and put more emphasis upon the latter part of the scriptures than they did the first part of the scriptures, because in order for a society to be able to take peace from the earth, you have to have peace to take from the earth. And right now we're going in the opposite direction and have been going in the opposite direction for 30 plus years that I can validate, but then I can actually fine tune it and open my eyes up even further in saying, well, this is where America started going wrong. You know, from the 1956 era on up into the assassination of Kennedy, on up to the movement that should have taken place in the late 80s. It didn't. Leading into what went on down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. 2 years later, what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. What went on in and during 9/11. And now we went through COVID. And now we went through all these other transformations pertaining to how the oil industry lied to us and now has brought on global warming in such of a degree that it's now undeniable, and what's going on all over the world, unless you're basically either so blind or so prideful that you're not willing to admit to any of your wrongs, that has basically led us down this road of Primrose Path. Primrose Path. It's not going to be no election or no president or no body pertaining to a party that's going to save the American institution. And if that's what you're pulling and grasping for, it ain't going to happen. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get that much more crazier and that much more out of control.
Effectively quoting Mussolini and Hitler.
It's sad. It's really, really sad in the state of affairs that's going on right now in America. Like I said, that years ago would not have existed.
Watching the big game. You know, when buying snacks for the game, you might have noticed one thing. Sports drinks bottles are smaller. The bag of chips has fewer chips, but they're still charging you just as much. And as an ice cream lover, what makes me the most angry is that ice cream cartons have actually shrunk in size, but not in price. I've had enough of what they call shrinkflation. It's a ripoff. Some companies are trying to pull a fast one by shrinking the products little by little and hoping you won't notice. Give me a break. The American public is tired of being played for suckers. I'm calling on companies to put a stop to this. Let's make sure businesses do the right thing now.
President Biden taking to social media to complain about shrinkflation ahead of yesterday's big game. For more on this and much more, let's go to the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew, what's he actually doing to prevent shrinkflation?
I don't think he's doing much to prevent shrinkflation. I think he's saying, I'm regular Joe, and I have the same upset and frustrations as the American public does. And I think there is a little bit of that across the country right now. I think we've all seen less chips in the bag, and we're paying as much, if not more, for it. Whether that's an effective campaign or not to shame CEOs or businesses, I think is probably a hard one. The truth is that either you're going to have less chips or the bag is going to cost more. And that's sort of the gamble at play here. Obviously, it's gotten a lot of attention on social media. By the way, interestingly enough, I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but the Biden campaign planning to start a TikTok account as well.
Oh, boy.
That's interesting. That's interesting because, of course,
Yes.
so many federal agencies are not allowed to have TikTok on their phones. It raises all sorts of questions about who's going to manage such a campaign and from what phone and device they're going to be doing it from. But again, this making some waves. I don't know. I think this was really in lieu of, by the way, the campaign this year.
All these double standards. That's what's got us in trouble. Too many double standards. Too many hypocrites.
John Meacham, which is, should he be doing interviews out
Too
there,
much hypocrisy.
showing what he can say or can't say? We had by the way, just to go to that Meacham piece for 1 second, because it just happened on our air, and it was so shocking to me. Jay Clayton, who used to run the SEC under President Trump, who's not a Trump lover at all, and I think would have preferred another candidate. We were talking just about some of the comments that Trump made over the weekend about NATO and the like, and I said, well, who would you vote for today? And he said, well, what's the choice? And I said, Biden's the choice. And he said, well, then I'm voting for Trump. And so it really does get to this idea of what's happening, and I think explains a little bit, at least, of the polls. Now, who knows where we're going to be, in 6 or 8 months from now. But I was watching you talk to John Meacham and thinking a lot about the comments that were just made.
That is so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. It's also frightening. I am so concerned.
There's
for
that word, frightening.
the sake of this democracy, because people are not adding up the problem, clearly. Let's talk about a bigger gamble, and that would be Super Bowl ads.
Yep.
How much were folks paying to get, 10, 20, 30 seconds in that
goodness,
precious time?
$7 million for every 30 seconds. The expectation is that Apple paid for the halftime show, the Usher show, which was probably something on the order of $50 million. And of course, in terms of licensing fees over the next 10 years, the NFL set to get about $23 billion. That's with a B. This is clearly the one piece of programming that does better than just about anything else on TV by a long shot. And you could argue is keeping the TV business in business.
There you go. It sure is. CNBC's, did you have a favorite one, Andrew?
I'm going with Dunkin'. Dunkin' Donuts for me,
That was a good
I
one.
thought was the winner, but I don't know. What about you? What was your favorite?
That was a good one. I like the Stop Hate commercials for sure.
Love
but
that.
I'm
Robert
kind of
Kraft
with
did
you.
a great job
So,
supporting that ad.
Bob
Yeah.
Kraft did. CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin, thank you so much. So Molly, your piece, latest opinion piece for MSNBC is entitled "Robert Hur Took a Page from the James Comey Playbook and made it worse." You write in part, quote, "The report is being seen by some as an exoneration, saying that no criminal charges are warranted in the classified documents case against President Joe Biden. But Hur, who used to work for the Trump administration, couldn't let Biden off the hook entirely, especially 269 days before an election. Hur, a member of the Republican Party that now largely works as a campaign arm for the former president, delivered the goods for his party. Sure, he found no legal basis to charge Biden. But, Hur proceeded to editorialize ad nauseum about Biden's mental acuity, delivering right-wing talking points up on a platter. So, Molly, I'll go to you, and then I'd love to hear from Amanda on this. Look, yes, he did. He did that. And I think that everyone who's, it's amazing because Joe and I have been opposite on this. He's been more upset about it, and I've heard a lot of people on the phone just freaking out about this all. And I'm thinking, let's not play into their hands. Let's look at what the special prosecutor's report found. No charges were warranted. Okay, so he spontaneously added some color in there to try and...
Let's go forward real quick right here. That's kind of old news in a way. But, they're attacking Biden right now pertaining to his age, pertaining to him being able to remember. And somebody must have really touched a sore spot, a soft spot with him towards bringing up something about him remembering about his son's death. Once more, these are all immature attacks of one party trying to dehumanize the other party. And it's reached a level of sickness that goes beyond just sickness, but it's actually reached a level of wickedness that most people don't see as it being demonically wicked. But it really is. And we are being calloused in believing that all these that all these things are normal, and they're not normal. None of this is normal pertaining to you go back to the original standards of how our politicians talked to the people and how they had various goals and ideals and visions of where we was going to go as a nation, as a body. What's going on today in comparison to our ancestors? And I ain't talking about our forefathers going all the way back into the late 17 or early 1800s. I'm talking about just within the past lifespan of my life, which I'm soon to be 63 in March, has erraticalized itself. It's erraticalized itself, and because it's erraticalized itself, it's made the public that much more erraticaler. Now, if we don't pay enough attention in identifying this poison that is being spewed out, then obviously there's only going to be more poison, and there's going to be more dehumanizing factors that the American people are going to say, "Oh, this is normal. Oh, this is okay. Oh, this is a good way to go, right?" No, it is not. We're going down this primrose path of doom and gloom, and if people can't see that, either they're blinded or they're incapable of seeing this. And I tend to wonder which is excelling over the other towards whether or not it be done either ignorantly or intentionally. Either or, it's coming from the pits of hell, and how that our country right now is being torn apart. And the American people deserve better than this. The American people deserve better than this on a political stance, on a social stance, on a spiritual stance. The American people deserve better than this.
The unions are going to be out of business. I'm telling you, if the Teamsters endorse Biden, here's the good news. Most of the Teamsters are going to vote for me anyway. And the unions. And workers, just workers. But you give illegal taxpayer-funded lawyers, so they have millions of dollars in this agreement, in this deal, which we, by the way, killed. I think we killed it. I think it's dead. But you can never say it because bad bills always come back to life.
Yeah, you killed it. Former President Trump at an NRA event on Friday taking credit for tanking the bipartisan border deal. The Senate is now trying to pass a standalone foreign aid package. 18 Republicans joined Democrats yesterday in voting to advance a bill to send $95 billion in aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. If the bill is passed by the Senate, it will head to the House, where its future in the Republican-led chamber remains uncertain, since the bill does not include border provisions, unlike the bill that Republicans just killed, that did address border security. This is a conundrum. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, officials say a drone strike in the city of Kharkiv on Saturday killed 7 people, including 3 children, after it hit an oil depot. It comes as members of the House Intelligence Committee visited Ukraine's capital last week, meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Joining us now, 2 members who were on that very trip, Democrat Abigail Spanberger of Virginia.
That's another area that basically is blinding to the vast majority of the people here in America, is pertaining to all the heartaches and all the horrors that people are going through right now, regardless whether it be the people in Ukraine or the people over in the Middle East or the people in Africa or the people in South America. The horrors that so many people right now are experiencing and are going through is absolutely some of the most saddest, sickening things that can happen to human beings, regardless of what continent that they may be living on. It is absolutely a phenomenon that is basically running wild, out of control. And if you have any leadership skills about you at all, you have to start asking the question, where's the end game? Where's all this going to lead to? What's going to happen to not just the Americans, but what's going to happen to the world in general, especially whenever the banking industry is talking about digitalizing all the currency and basically going to go in and I don't know if the right word would be manipulate or modify, but either or, it's all going in the direction towards a one world government, a new world order that the Bible talks about that will occur pertaining to the mark of the beast, the Antichrist. And if you can't see this, it's either that you don't want to see it or you're incapable of seeing it. That's kind of like my son telling me in one of his texts, Dad, you're frightened of porn. No, I'm not necessarily frightened of porn because people make love and have babies. That's a fact. But to distribute it openly the way that they do, I'm not frightened of porn. I'm frightened of the aftermath of what porn can do towards tearing a marriage apart or basically destroying society as we know it in a productive way. And to be teaching children porn, to me, is the same thing as telling a 8-year-old, go get that bag of marijuana, let's roll up a hooter, let's roll up a doobie, and let's smoke it. You're subjecting children in areas that should not be subjected to because they have undeveloped minds. They have no idea in who they are, what they are, or what they want to be. And whenever you start putting ideals into their heads and you target these children at that age, you are asking for a society that, if you think it's wicked and demonic now, give it another 20 years. Give it another 20 years and you'll think that these are the good old days in the year 2024 compared to the year 2044, provided that the world lasts that long. Because I'm telling you right now, God will put an end to it once he realizes that society is basically doomed. They're on the same path that what the society was during Sodom and Gomorrah, during the society of the Great Flood, of Noah's society, or the other societies. Once God determines and makes that determination that they're unrepairable, then is whenever we will see the wrath of God fall upon the humanity like we have never ever begun to believe or see ever before. And that's what we're teeter-tottering in going into. 60 billion for the Ukraine aid, 14 billion for the Israeli assistance, 10 billion for humanitarian assistance. I'm pretty sure that's got to do with down on the border. 4.8 billion to support Taiwan. That's 60, 74, 84. That's $90 billion right there. That's about $90 billion right there just in that one slot. Once again, we are not a self-sustainable country if we are spending $5 trillion and only getting back 3, because that's basically where we stand right now in the statistics. These ain't ideals. These ain't metaphors. These are not ideologies. These are facts, my friends. These are facts that the American government, pertaining to the White House, is only receiving $3 trillion a year. But we are spending a little over 5. If you cannot figure out that that is a one-way street to bankruptcy or doom and gloom pertaining to a self-sustainable people, then obviously you either don't care about your own country or you're incapable of understanding these things. It would be the same differences if you had $1,000 in the bank every month, but you continue to keep spending $1,000 and $100 every month. And you got to be out more money on penalty fees. You get cancellation fees. You got not bankruptcy fees, but you got banking statement fees that now is going to eat up even that much more. In other words, if you write a bad check today, which I haven't written a check now in probably almost 15 or 20 years. If you write a bad check today, even if it's only for $1, $1 check bounced will probably cost you, once it goes to the court system and etc., that $1 being bounced will probably cost you over $100, maybe even $200. See where I'm going with all this? It's sickening.
Our economy is recovering. It still has some problems, but we're on track for a great recovery.
The economy is not recovering. Don't let these people lie to you. Our recovery, pertaining to being trillions and trillions of dollars in debt, is not going backwards, but we're still digging our hole deeper. And if they tell you these things, they are telling you lies.
A lot of really amazing things over the last couple of years under Joe Biden's leadership, and we're going to take that message to folks. That is the solution. We're not going to act like the other side because we're not them.
Congresswoman Elise Jordan here. The images coming out of Rafah just the last day have been horrifying, and this weekend President Biden and Netanyahu supposedly had a conversation where Biden asked for the aid to be conditional on protecting civilians. It does not seem that the operation was approached that way.
There is areas right now on a humanitarian scale, especially over in the Middle East, that has reached a level of concern with the medical industry that has not been this alarming since World War II.
How should the U.S. use the leverage of our $14 billion in this bill to do more for civilians?
Well, we as a United States Congress need to demonstrate that we are also committed to the safety and security of civilians. That is one of the components of this bill. We've talked about the military support, the military aid to Israel, to Ukraine, and to Taiwan, but in this bill as well is humanitarian support for Palestinian civilians. And let me be very clear on this issue. For anyone concerned about the safety and security of anyone in Israel now or long into the future, ensuring that Israel and the United States are partnering not just in Israel's efforts to go after the Hamas terrorists who committed the atrocities in October, but also supporting and ensuring the safety of innocent civilians throughout Gaza and the West Bank.
Democratic members of the House Intelligence Committee, Jason Crow of Colorado and Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. Thank you both very much for coming on this morning. We really appreciate it. And up next, we'll go live to the federal courthouse in Fort Pierce, Florida, where former President Donald Trump is expected to attend today's hearing related to his handling of classified documents. Morning Joe will be right back.
Total anarchy. Chaos. Stuff that, like I said earlier, and it goes back to some of the practicality things that we was taught growing up as children, such as if you give somebody an inch, they will take a mile. Such as the small things are the things that will damage us worse than the bigger things, because you can always see the bigger things coming. Just like Lincoln said, beginning with the first phases of this recording, that we don't necessarily have to worry about being attacked from the outside, but from within, in the conjecture of us being able to maintain and keep our democracy. Once more, it is and was established in the format of the holy, eternal, righteous God Almighty. Once you start deviating from that, then you start going in the wrong directions. You know, I've had people criticize me and say, Dennis, how come you want to spend so much time on TV? How come you want to watch the news? How come you're so politically involved in various things going on, not just here in America, but throughout the world? The word would be concern. I was a concerned citizen whenever I went out west and discovered the things that I discovered pertaining to the Mount Carmel Waco and the Oklahoma bombing. I was concerned towards putting out advisories of electrical disturbances and a bloody road ahead. I did not put these things out to the general public because I wanted to put them out there to them pertaining to the bad news barrier, but I put them out there so that other people could pay attention to what I'm talking about, and maybe we could deviate from one of the worst calamities that America and the world is fixing to have to run off into.
They couldn't tell whether he was a buffoon or whether he was a stooge of Putin or what he was trying to do. It seems to me, in international relations, people like to see that you've learned from experience, you've learned from the past. There's no evidence that Trump has.
Rick Stengel, good to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the man in charge of our nation's armed forces, is back in the hospital this morning. He was admitted to the critical care unit last night for a, quote, emergency bladder issue. He's since transferred his duties to Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks, and he's notified the White House, Joint Chiefs, and Congress. Just earlier this month, Austin apologized for his lack of transparency around a hospitalization related to prostate cancer treatment back in December.
The older you get, the more apt you are of having health issues. That's obvious. That's a given. This isn't no new discovery.
President Biden's age and memory. NBC's Ali Rafa joins us from the White House with more now. Ali, what are we hearing?
Yeah, Anna, a full court press was really launched over the weekend by not just the White House, but also the Biden campaign, Democratic allies, even the president's personal attorneys, trying to restore any lost confidence by voters in his ability to serve a second term as president in the aftermath of the special counsel report. And this was really an all hands on deck response. We saw the White House circulate this memo over the weekend, quoting Republicans who in the past have complimented the president on his mental fitness. Part of that memo saying in part, quote, on multiple occasions, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has emphasized how sharp, smart, and tough he finds the president. And Anna, the Biden team knows that this age issue isn't something that they can just wish away. The best that they can do to shift the messaging around it is to put people who regularly interact with the president out in front of the public to talk about their experiences with him. And that's exactly what we saw this weekend when DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and Biden campaign co-chair Mitch Landrieu were on Meet the Press. Listen to that here.
I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game. This kind of sense that he's not ready for this job is just a bucket of beef.
Neither party is willing to admit to their faults, and neither party are willing to admit that what that they have done, they have taken.
Able to remember the exact date of his beloved son.
They have taken America down a road that America never should have went down.
His son Beau's death. And in that email, she says that, quote, we should give everyone grace, and I can't imagine someone would try to use our son's death to score political points. Two senior campaign advisors telling NBC that this email is their most successful and best performing after the email they sent when the...
See the levels that they're willing to go into now? Towards attacking one another? Towards trying to make each other build one another up? By tearing one another down? I'm telling you, this is a recipe of disaster. And I think that I'm not the only one that can see this. It's wicked. It's absolutely wicked. And our ancestors years ago did not demoralize themselves this way. But now we're seeing it on a day-to-day, everyday level that, you know, it's kind of like whenever I started seeing the Jerry Springer show back in the 90s come about. I knew then, wow, we're in trouble as a moral nation whenever you can sit and laugh over people's heartaches, over people's illnesses, over people's terrifying moments in their lives, and you can sit and be entertained by that. We really are and have become a very, very perverted, sick nation.
Campaign was actually launched on it.
Okay, Ali Rafa, thank you for all of that. And joining us now is Mark McKinnon, former advisor to President George W. Bush. And
let's go. I mean, it's sickening. It is absolutely sickening in what I'm seeing and hearing every day on the American TV set.
On Congress to provide those resources, and now on its way to passage in the Senate.
So, what do we do now?
I'm not going to vote for this aid package because I think this body did not seriously entertain trying to strengthen our border. The bill is going nowhere in the House.
The Senate paved a path to eventually pass the bill for Israel and Taiwan. After breaking a filibuster over the weekend, the Senate is now on track to approve the bill later this week, but House Speaker Mike Johnson opposes aid to Ukraine. Stuart?
All right, Chad, we'll take it. Thanks very much indeed. Secretary Mayorkas says the administration is not responsible for the border crisis. Roll tape.
No doubt there is gridlock on Congress, but do you bear responsibility for what is happening at the border, what the president himself has called a crisis?
It certainly is a crisis, and, well, we don't bear responsibility for a broken system, and we're doing a tremendous amount within that broken system. But fundamentally, Congress is the only one who can fix it.
All right, joining me now, Congressman Chip Roy, Republican from the great state of Texas. Welcome back.
About how no one knew that the tunnels were underneath the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency's headquarters. Just last week, a report revealed, quote, in 2014, part of the parking lot at the UNRWA headquarters in Gaza began sinking, likely from a Hamas tunnel dug beneath. No one talked about what was causing the collapse. A former UNRWA official said, but, and this is in quotes, everyone knew. Republican Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey with this.
Right below the headquarters of UNRWA in Gaza Strip was a command and control facility, huge, for Hamas. Hamas and UNRWA, there's no distinction between the two. It's a distinction without a difference. And it's about time policymakers here in the U.S. and around the world recognize that.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board with a brand new piece titled "Hamas was right under UNRWA's nose." Quote, "The United Nations agency looked the other way, keeping Gaza safe for Hamas." This only adds to the scrutiny of the agency after Israel provided evidence that 12 UNRWA employees actually took part in the October 7th massacre, and 1,200 of them have links to Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Fox.
Corruption, money. No longer loyal to what's right. Only worried about saving their own skins.
Fox News contributor Steve Hilton. This is unbelievable that no one spoke about this until now.
Well, exactly. I mean, more and more is coming out that reveals this absolutely structural anti-Semitism that is built in to the United Nations, more broadly, specifically UNRWA. We knew of the participation of their employees in the atrocities and the links to Hamas, and also the celebrations. I mean, these are people who work for UNRWA. We have their messages celebrating the butchery and slaughter of Israelis. And actually there's a broader point here. It's not just UNRWA. UNRWA is the most extreme manifestation of this structural anti-Semitism within the United Nations. You just look at their votes over the years here in America, at the UN headquarters. They are structurally anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and honestly, it is high time we didn't just, stop funding UNRWA, obviously, but the United Nations itself. Look, there may be some useful humanitarian work that it does, and we can fund that separately and continue, but we should defund the United Nations, which is now totally captured ideologically by the far left.
Well, if we're going to fund them, they got to move their headquarters. I mean, there's some changes that have to be made so that we can vet them before we fund them. I mean, a whole lot of steps need to be happening now. Look, everybody wants to help people who are in trouble, but not to the destruction of everything around it. I mean, headquarters over Hamas. Relocate. So here's a question for you. If what you're saying is predicated on people knew, how did we get to the point where then people are pushing back? Of course they're going to push back on Israel going after Hamas, because there's some secrets down there. And if it were not for Hamas opening up those tunnels and looking for hostages and doing what it needs to do, then they can't get to Hamas, and then those people, the world doesn't have to be responsible. The world, meaning those other Arab nations, they can continue to look the other way.
Exactly. That's why it's so important that we do continue to support what's going on here, because it's revealing how rotten the whole thing has been. And Israel, remember, has been living with this for year after year after year, and they've been saying this, and now the world is seeing it, and that's why it's incredibly important. In a way, the harder that it gets for Israel, the more important it is that we stand solidly with them.
Yeah, that's why it was so unbelievable when the president just riffed the other day. What Israel is doing is over the top without the context. Exactly. And I mean, this had to have been in the national advisory that the president gets. I mean, this was known last week far before the public would have known it, I would imagine. All right, we'll move to this. Back here at home, attacks on New York City police officers have skyrocketed in recent years. We know this. And the NYPD is still crunching the numbers, but it projects that for 2023, there will be more than 5,400 police officers injured in attacks. That number is rising steadily and has been for the past few years. The police union president told the New York Post, city leaders like far-left District Attorney Alvin Bragg have built a dangerous environment for years. He says it's not going to get better until those who attack police officers are consistently prosecuted and kept in jail. The chaos drawing national attention after a 15-year-old teenager, illegally here, was charged as an adult for opening fire on officers trying to arrest him. And a group of people, not American citizens, also potentially here illegally, because we've got to wait for the case to go through, viciously beat those two officers in Times Square. And so now what we're hoping is that there's justice here, so we're careful with this and we're careful with that. Why can't they just deport these people?
Exactly. I mean, you do this to one of our police officers, and you're out of the country. I mean, that should be obvious. Every reasonable person would support that. But there are two parts to this, Harris. There's exactly as you say, there's the holding people accountable for the crime that is just so fundamental that you do not assault the people who keep us safe, right? So there's that part of it. But we also need to look at the culture that has led up to this, because it isn't just illegal immigrants who are participating in these attacks. It's a wide range of people, and it all comes from the far left ideology, defund the police, which has demoralized the police, caused this disrespect for the police, and the Democratic Party has led that disrespect for the police. That's part of the story too.
I want to say this, and I'm going to end this video. I don't forget now what year it was. I think it was after my brother died in 2017 that I went up here to Dresden, Tennessee in Weakley County, and I got permission from one of the mayors to speak on the sidewalk. And within 15 minutes of me talking about how that the blood was going to be coming down the walls of the courthouse, I was rudely interrupted by the police squad that come down there and told me to pack it up and leave. And the reason why was because they didn't like the content of what I was preaching. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I was trying to be honest. That because of what the Weakley County courts have been involved in, not just since I come back to Tennessee in 2014, pertaining to my brother's death, but what they have been involved in by not being involved in pertaining to the Windmill Ministries going all the way back into the late 80s, because of that, the consequences are going to be the blood running down the walls. And I'm just not referring to the walls of the Weakley County Dresden court system. I'm talking about the walls of all the walls all over the world pertaining to a bloody road ahead. People in this area, especially in the United States, have chosen this path. Now, regardless whether they've done it intentionally or not intentionally, consciously or unconsciously, they have chosen this path. They have chosen this path. And until we see a mighty movement that will be sustained by and with the Windmill Ministries missions, we're going to continue to see things declining and going in the wrong direction. Good luck to all of us. As we say again and again and again, God bless America, God bless our troops, God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. But whenever we're seeing not a pattern, but a flood of this type of activity now that's invading our lives, and we're still not seeing a movement of God pertaining to a revival, we're in trouble, folks. We're in big, big trouble. And if you're not willing to see that and understand that and accept that, and then it's no one's fault but your own, because I, as a messenger, am required and responsible of getting the message out. How people respond to the message and how they support the messenger is up to them. God bless and shalom.